Thanks again for being here, everyone. Today, we are going to be focusing on this idea of ethical purchasing and also the two standards meditation in the spiritual exercises. So we think that those the themes just intersect very nicely. So we're going to begin with prayer.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and get started on this Monday. Jesus, compassionate word of our God, a God of all people, let us walk in your way, courageous in pursuing the justice you desire. Let us hide not from the truth, lifting it as high as a healing balm for all. Let us flock to your light and your love, and in so doing, banishing the darkness of hate, violence, and fear. Let us commit to a peace that knows justice, a faith that does justice, and a people that loves justice. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Julie. All righty. And just so as we begin today, you can see in the agenda that was sent out, and I'll also put that in the chat in just another minute. We always have a link where you can do some research about the Indigenous people on the land where you currently live. So this is a land acknowledgement for what is known as Cleveland, where Julie and I live. And recognize the land upon which I reside. Express deep gratitude to the Native people who lived and worked here before me, those whose stewardship and resilient spirits have sustained this sacred land, which is the traditional homeland of the Erie, Lenape, Delaware, Shawnee, Wyandot, Miami, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and other Great Lakes tribes. And as always, and related to the land acknowledgement, we want to acknowledge the context in which we are living. We are living in an unprecedented moment in human history and in the history of the world, where we're having a disproportionate impact on the planet and on biodiversity and species loss. And so we just lift this up as a reminder that the discussions that we have here today and moving out of this space are extremely important and will have consequences for current and future generations. And so just to get us started, I did want to just briefly, this was sent out in the email, and many folks who are here are probably very familiar with the spiritual exercises, but just in case you are not, I wanted to uplift the meditation on the two standards, which is found in the second week of the exercises, and this just kind of helps us contextualize this space a little bit today. So in this meditation, the retreatant is invited to imagine a battlefield and to imagine kind of the army of Satan on one side and the army of Christ on another. We know that Ignatius loves military images. And they're standing under standards or flags. And so on kind of Satan's side of the field, the standard that folks are standing underneath uplifts this idea of riches, of accumulating more, and really getting a sense of honor and pride, right, from those things those kind of worldly accumulations that we have. And on Christ's side of the field, the values that you're standing under Christ's flag is this kind of movement towards poverty or simplicity, this sense of a movement towards contempt, which can seem counterintuitive, but it's just generally this idea that when we try to work against worldly systems, often we will be criticized for this and received contempt from others. So it's not that we are having contempt for people, but usually that is put upon folks who are living differently. And then the sense of humility, right? The sense of remembering that we are not God, we are finite. And so we have a small piece of the work to do in this, but an important piece. And so as we think about these two standards and kind of how we're living our lives, it's really an opportunity to meditate on our values and how we're living our values. And in the Laudato Si action platform, we are also invited into goal 3, which is a focus on ecological economics. And what I like about both of these words is they start with eco, which their prefix comes from the Greek oikos, which means household, right? And so these words are really about like, how are we managing our households if we think of our earth and our resources kind of as one family, which I think is a beautiful image. And so goal 3 really invites us to think about how the economies that we're living in and supporting, how they support the dignity of work and the rights of workers, and also how they support a healthy biosphere, right? So that all life can flourish, biodiversity, humans, everything. And Catholic social teaching has a long kind of history of talking about the economy as existing to support people and not the other way around. And we could probably also say people and creation. And so really this goal is inviting us to think about how are we supporting economies that really do recognize our biosphere as finite and people and planet as full of dignity that will protect the dignity of all of creation. And so I think that the meditation on the two standards can really give us an opportunity to reflect on if our stated values as individuals or institutions are actually being lived out as we think about how we participate in these economies. So with that, just to get us started, and there's some reflection questions in the email as well. I want to turn it over to Julie Meyer, who is our coordinator for ethical purchasing initiatives here at the Ignatian Solidarity Network and just a really beloved colleague. And she is going to be speaking to us a bit about this idea of ethical purchasing.
Great. Thanks, Brenna. And I'm not an expert. This is life work, right? Like learning how to walk lightly on the earth and care about how our decisions, particularly our purchasing decisions, have affect the world and workers is life work, right? Like we need to be like thinking about this constantly. So I'm not an expert, but I'll offer my humble little thoughts and then some reflection questions for us to wrestle with as well. So I'm going to share my screen here, and I am going to hope that you don't see all of my notes, but Brenna and I practiced this. Okay, good. So yeah, like Brenna said, I'm Julie. I'm here in Cleveland. Started with ISN just about a year ago, and just working very part-time on this issue of ethical consumption, ethical consumerism. And I'll share a little bit more about our particular projects towards the end, but just wanted to give us some context to start with. So this first slide, I'm going to talk about fast fashion. I'm going to talk about the clothing industry. Ethical consumerism obviously goes way beyond clothes and fashion, but I feel like it's a helpful model to talk about the economic system that's just built on disposability. Like things are built and designed for trash, right? And that whole industry is also kind of focused on excess, buying way more than you need, stuffing our closets with more and our drawers with more things than we could ever imagine actually wearing regularly. So I feel like it's this great microcosm of how the economy just isn't working. It isn't fit to scale with how our lives should be. So I have a few things here with what's wrong with fast fashion, and I break it down into 3 different parts. So people, my little icons there, people, planet, and profits. So the first one, this 2%. So only 2% of garment workers in the globally earn a living wage. So 98% of people are really just barely scraping by, probably like way beyond barely scraping by. And up until just, I think it was November, this was true in the United States as well. California is kind of the largest remaining hub for sewing for garment workers here in the United States. And they passed a bill, I think it was November, prohibiting subcontractors from paying what's called a piece rate system. So this is how a lot of garment workers are paid, is called piece rate. So for example, you get 10 cents if you sew this hem across the neck. You get 5 cents if you do a sleeve cuff. And Now in California, you have to pay a minimum wage. And then on top of that, you can use a piece rate system to incentivize people. But what that meant is that there are workers with 20 plus years of sewing ability, are super fast, but they could work 10 to 12 hours a day and not make a living wage. So this is a big deal for this to be changed in the United States. And it faced a lot of pressure, but it's a good sign, right? So this could be a model perhaps for a global model. The second thing in this people, 1,134 people, that's the number of people who died in 2013 in Bangladesh when a garment factory collapsed. And there were a lot of Western brands being made there. And it's all murky because all these subcontractors are contractors of other subcontractors. So nobody took blame, right? So none of those brands got any really bad PR. It was kind of like, oh, bummer, that was the factory owner's problem. But basically workers had been pointing out the foundational cracks in the buildings up until the day before. And were told by the owners, go to work or lose your job, like walk away if you don't want to walk in the door. And it was later discovered that the top 3 of the 6 floors had been added later on without the proper support, and definitely weren't designed for heavy machinery, vibrations in some of that machinery. And this is the price of fast fashion, right? Like 1,134 people crushed in a building that, and those doors were locked, right? So they weren't able to get out. There weren't, fire exits. There weren't windows that opened, like the doors were locked from the outside to prevent supposed theft from those workers. So that's what's wrong with fast fashion if we only have to choose one stat, right? So moving on to this next piece, this planet part, Planet Money from NPR did the little study on the number of miles it takes to get from one cotton plant to the t-shirt in your closet, like a piece of, like to build a cotton t-shirt. And they found it to be 16,500 miles, which is crazy, right? Like it's traveled around the globe. Like, and this is just a t-shirt. This is just like a really basic t-shirt traveling 16,000 miles to get from a cotton plant to your door. So that way complicates this idea that when we look at our tag, it says made in Vietnam, made in Bangladesh, wherever. Like it's been around the globe before it gets into your closet, most t-shirts. So a very alarming statistic when we're talking about ecological footprint of one garment, the amount of miles that it takes to get into your hands. The next statistic is 7 times, and that's the average number of times that a clothing item is worn before it's disposed, which really surprised me. And I wanted to think like, that's not true. I wear my clothes for decades, for a long time, as long as I still fit in them. But then I was really thinking about it. And if you imagine, this is kind of a soft statistic, but that we wear 20% of our closets 80% of the time. So if you think we're always reaching for that same like cozy sweatshirt, like those jeans that fit right, as well, working from home, maybe it's more like cozy leggings, like, but we're all like we're reaching for the same thing. So if you think about the things that stay in our closets that are for special occasions, or like don't quite fit right, but like you haven't got rid of it yet, that there's a lot of things that kind of just sitting in there, and that we don't wear that often. So that average things are worn 7 times before discarded or passed on. And considering now that polyester is making up a majority of garment material, that's kind of alarming. Polyester is plastic, right? Like that's mined from oil in the earth, like, and it's being woven into our clothes at an alarming rate that we don't know how long that takes to break down. It hasn't existed long enough for us to know. Like it could take 100 years, it could take 1,000 years. We don't know. Especially when those things are blended into cotton. Like the cotton may or may not be broken down depending on how it's layered in a landfill, but the polyester is probably not. So, and then you think about kind of on top of that, like after these major holidays like Halloween, when costumes are designed to be basically worn once and then trashed, or like matching family pajamas, that are a big Christmas thing for people that are like super cute, but like really, like my husband's not going to wear like zip, like they would have been a fun picture. We didn't do this, but like my husband's not going to wear like a big zip up like onesie any other time besides like the 30 seconds it takes to take a picture, So like some things are just designed for one-time use, and that's alarming to think about. So And then I'm spending a lot of time on this slide. 52 seasons is last statistic under this, under the planet. And the fashion industry, maybe 20, 30 years ago, had 4 seasons that made sense: spring, summer, fall, and winter. And now a lot of these, like H&M, Zara, some of these like kind of fast fashion-y stores have 52 micro seasons. So a new line of clothes every week, which is crazy, right? So what used to take months and months to design on a page, to send to a designer to figure out exactly how this would be shaped, to be sent to a factory to be actually made, and then come back to a store, that used to take months and months. Now it takes 2 weeks. So what the fashion industry is telling us is that your clothes from 2 weeks ago are outdated. Like, that's crazy. So all of your stuff, if you haven't bought it in the last 2 weeks, like, it's old news. Like, it's discarded fashion. Like, you may as well, like, stores are completely wiping out a whole, like, the whole section and restocking it 2 weeks later with completely new things. So what does that tell us? Like, what is that, even if we don't believe it, what's that telling us constantly is that we need new things. And because I didn't see that last week, like, I want to buy that because it's new. And that color is out and this color's in, and that cut is out and this cut is in. So yeah, just wild stuff. And then moving on to the profit piece, the fashion industry is a $3 trillion industry. Those are numbers I don't understand. It's beyond what we can possibly fathom, right? $3 trillion, it's the 4th largest industry in the world. But what that means, when I see that number, I think there's resources to make this industry fair, right? There's resources to invest into different technology, into paying better wages for people. Like, $3 trillion, like, there's resources there to figure this out, to do things with. And then this last statistic, ever since I heard it, it has been like, it just gnaws on me. So an Oxfam report calculated that it takes just over 4 days for the CEO of one of these top 5 companies in the fashion industry to earn what an ordinary Bangladeshi garment worker will earn in her whole lifetime. So a CEO in the fast fashion world is going to make in 4 days what someone who's making the clothes in Bangladesh, like an ordinary Bangladeshi woman, is going to make in her whole life. And she's probably putting in 100 hours of difficult labor every week. So that's a few things that are wrong with the fashion industry, just to start us off on a really depressing note. Let's talk about things that are exciting or different. Like, so what do we need to do differently? And I just think we need to think differently. Like, this is the water we swim in. This is, like, if you don't take a breath to reflect on it, like, it's just normal, right? And we don't want that to be normal. We don't want our world to mean that. So with the fashion industry, like, opting out isn't an option for many of us. And opting out of consumption, of capitalism, is not a viable option for most of us. Some people, and I have my moments where, like, going off grid sounds really exciting, but still we're participating in this in some way. So, like, how do we participate in a way that we feel good about? And I think the first thing is just to let go of guilt. I think being guilty and feeling like you're never doing enough, or like having this terrible pang of guilt when you buy something, you know, that wasn't 100% organic cotton sheets. Like, I just think if we're just going to be paralyzed by that, like, it's not helpful, right? So if it uses you to, like, propel you into making other decisions, then great. But if you're just going to be paralyzed by it, I think it's not worth it. So I would say just let go of the guilt and let's figure out different ways to do things. And I think so often we get very stuck in the top, the very top of this pyramid, which is this beautiful piece of art that I found called the hierarchy of needs. So kind of playing off this Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I think sometimes when we talk about ethical consumerism, we get stuck in that top part of the triangle. So that buy part, like, what can I buy that is, like, all organic, or what can I buy that's giving living wages for people? And that's very important. Like, those are good questions. But I think if we only spend our time, like, laser focused on those things, we're going to miss this whole other opportunity, all these other things we can do differently. And the first one is just using what you have, which is really hard, right? Because I think when I gave this presentation, when I was talking to students at the Ignatian Family Teach-In, and they were mostly high schoolers, I said, let go of the guilt, because people are paid millions and millions and millions of dollars to make you want things. They're doing their job, and they're doing a great job doing it, right? Like, they've convinced me that I kind of want that. Like, it looks really great. Like, I feel like that would look good on me, or like that would make my life easier. People are paid big bucks to convince you of that. And it works, right? Like, I want those things. And I think that's okay. So like, let go of that guilt. Like, it's normal to feel that way, because people have created algorithms and social media accounts and marketing plans just for me, right? Like, I feel like everything in Trader Joe's is like marketed for me. Like, all I want is everything there, you know, like it's designed for my eyeballs. So I think I don't need to feel guilty about it. I just need to think like thoughtfully when I walk into a Trader Joe's. But yeah, so the bottom place, just use what you have. Like, open up your closet, like what's already there, what's in our kitchen cabinets that we can use, that we don't need like another bowl. Like, if we already have one, like, let's just use what we have. And then these middle two, the swap and borrow, I think those are super fascinating, and kind of this, if anyone's part of a Buy Nothing group on Facebook, like those are really taking off now, of people trying to just give away things to somebody who would actually use them, or acquiring things that you need for free. But those involve relationships. Like, those involve investing our time in things and people, to figure out if I want to borrow, like, for example, we've been getting a lot of snow in Cleveland. So does everyone on my whole street need a snowblower? Like, probably not. Like, can we figure out who has one and how we can borrow that and kind of share that among the neighborhood? Like, that involves relationship building, that involves more trust. So yeah, I think those are really fascinating kind of areas for me, because then the top three are kind of more about purchasing those things. So can I buy it secondhand? Can I make it myself out of other things, or can I buy it new from a store? So yeah, I think I'm fascinated by all these different kind of options. Before we buy something, can we actually explore all these other things we could maybe do about that item that we feel like we need? Especially, I feel like post Christmas, like post holidays, when we just got bombarded with things, especially my children. Like, Santa brought a few things, more than they needed anyway. Like, they have plenty of toys, but Santa brought them each 3-4 things. But my parents, my mom got my kids just like a boatload of things, which was her way of being thoughtful, her way of playing, her way of interacting, you know, like, it's not a bad thing, but like, can I be brave enough to have conversations with her, right? To say like, actually, can we just rein it in? You know, like, they just want to play with you, like, get them a present, but they just want to play with you. So yeah, kind of this post-holiday stuff hangover that maybe some of us are still kind of living in, of just our houses are overrun with gifts that we kind of don't even want, you know, like a couple of my siblings and I like exchanged gifts, and I'm like, why? I'm an adult. Like, I could buy those things too, you know, like, they're nice, but like, we don't need to do that. So those are like conversations I'm thinking about for myself, like tough conversations with my family. Like, as part of this, we have to think differently. Like, I don't want holidays to feel like that kind of pressure in my family. So those are like things I want to choose to do differently. And then it's like part of this 2 standards that Brenna was talking about, but it's complicated, right? There is no holy grail item that's 100% ethical. And like, when we go to the store, there aren't like Satan flags and Jesus flags, like, depending on what you buy, you know, and you're like making your good purchase because it's like Christ would approve. Like, it's more complicated than that, right? It has to do with our own needs and what we, and the different values that we have. Like, is it valuing the earth? Is it valuing the worker? And, you know, there's complications there. So like, there's some gray area. Yeah. So that's why I would say this work for me is spiritual work. Like, it's not just black or white, it's right or wrong, it's ethical or it's not. It's making hard spiritual decisions, like my relationship, like putting my vulnerability out there about like my relationship with my family. Like, how can we talk about Christmas in a different way? You know, like, that's spiritual work, like being able to kind of wrestle with those things that, you know, those are traditions in my family for generations. Like, how do I kind of confront that in a way that's loving? And but challenges us to think differently about how we see the holidays. For example, a couple of fun quotes that like Oscar Romero said, aspire to have more, not aspire not to have more, but to be more. And then Pope Francis saying that purchasing is always a moral and not simply an economic act. So our great spiritual teachers out there, like also recognizing that stuff and purchasing, like those things, and being a consumer is a reality of our life, but how do we do that in a way that's thoughtful? So I'm going to share just 2 minutes of this video, and this is a group that's doing things differently. So this is a clip from a 10-minute video from the Industrial Commons. They're a nonprofit in North Carolina that works with manufacturing businesses to kind of build networks and solve problems like the one that you'll see in this video. And one of their brands is called Collection. Collection works with ISN on our purchasing initiative, ethical purchasing initiative that I'll talk about in a minute. So if you want to just listen here to see how a problem is presented as an opportunity, instead of just like, bummer, we have all this extra waste, they're like, okay, what are we going to do with it? So I think it's very fascinating. How can we think about using that lens for other ethical, economic, environmental issues that we're confronted with today, either ourselves or as a society? So I'm hoping this is queued up to the right part here.
Industries that we're in.
Sarah wanted to talk about things we could do in this community to strengthen manufacturing. They wanted to solve the problem that I saw at my factory for years, was textile waste going into the landfill. Material return is that one-stop shop for custom circularity. Whether that be you've got some old shirts and t-shirts, or whether that be you've got a weaving machine with weaving waste, no matter what, there's going to be a home on the other side. So with the circularity, we're able to take whatever type of waste gets sent in. So if it gets t-shirt waste gets sent in, it's going to be ground, turned back into a yarn, and then put back into a t-shirt again. It's amazing to see it grow so quickly. It's only been 2 years. Nobody had an idea of how to build this out and to make it work. But, you know, through all these great folks in our ecosystem, all within like 75 miles, we've got waste all the way to a yarn. That network we have, the experience we have, if it's going to work anywhere, it's going to work here. We have an awesome son. He's getting ready to be 6 in another week. He just graduated kindergarten, and they wrote on a piece of whiteboard what they wanted to be, and he had worker on there. And I was like, whoa, I think he understands, you know, the kind of potential already for what you can do in manufacturing. It's not just a job, it's the way you learn to make things.
I like that little part at the end, so that's why I left it there. But yeah, in case you didn't catch it, so they, within 75 miles, they're now collecting textile waste. So a furniture shop that is using like stuffing, or like having like extra material coming from making a cushion. Or when you're cutting out a t-shirt, like what are the scraps, you know, what are the scraps being used for? And right now they're able to weave that together into a yarn that they're now turning into socks and beanies and soon sweaters. And that's out of 100% waste, like things that would have been like 100% garbage. That's really impressive. That's a problem that was there that's now being turned into like a really amazing solution. So yeah, and ISN is actually selling these socks, and I don't know if the beanies are available quite yet, and the sweaters are probably down the line. But yeah, just a really exciting alternative, like thinking differently. I think that's why I'm showing this clip, because it's just about people who are thinking differently, and yeah, I think it's exciting. So I'm just going to close with what the work that ISN is partnering in. So this is SEPA, which is the Catholic Ethical Purchasing Alliance. And basically the work in a nutshell is trying to integrate Catholic social teaching into purchasing practices for institutions, and then try to institutionalize the process so that these aren't just like one-off purchases, like a campus ministry department at a university, just like they're going to do 300 t-shirts and they're just going to purchase them ethically, like one and done deal. It's figuring out how to institutionalize that by finding people, sympathetic people on campus that can kind of help build momentum to keep that relationship going with an ethical partner, but also able to kind of institutionalize, like write it into policies that's important to do those things. Like if you don't have enough money to buy ethically when you're going to do a big t-shirt order, then maybe you don't have enough money to do that, you know, that you need to rethink budget to be able to make some of those purchases. So right now the concrete work is looking like trying to get ethical options into bookstores of Catholic universities. So that's kind of where we're starting, hoping that kind of, we can get a snowball effect to get enough campuses interested and part of that, and then be able to kind of move over into other sectors like high schools and maybe parishes eventually. So right now we're working with Collection, who is part of that video that we just saw. And like the socks are going to be available in these bookstores, but also Equal Exchange, who many of you might be familiar with, that does fair trade coffee and chocolates and teas and other food stuff. So we're trying to just connect and network with institutions that already have the mission, already have the values, already have all those values of valuing the environment, the worker, and trying to see like, how do we turn that into purchasing practices? Like, it sounds like it should be a home run, but there's lots of bureaucracy we're figuring out, which has been really fascinating. So yeah, that's the work that we're doing right now, and trying to pair it also with lots of educational and formational opportunities. And God willing, bringing students down to North Carolina actually in March on some immersion experiences. So right now, John Carroll University in Cleveland is coming down, and Fordham is planning on coming down the week after. So just hoping that COVID allows that to happen, because those are kind of the firsthand experiences. They'll be going to North Carolina to visit folks like what we just saw in the video, to talk about material return, which is the name of that program that turns waste into yarn, and some other really amazing projects that they're doing down there. So that's what SEPA is doing, and ISN is kind of like the founding kind of partner of being able to make that happen. So that's where I'm going to end. I have some reflection questions, but I don't know if we wanted to, were there any other like questions that we want to tackle first, or Brenna, I don't know.
Yeah, Julie, do you have time to answer questions if folks have them?
Yeah.
Cool.
Another 10 minutes or so.
Cool.
It sounds quiet down there, so everyone's doing all right.
Great. Yeah. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute or raise your hand, and we can, or put them in the chat. Julia wanted to know what town the fabric recycling facility is in.
A lot of them are, so it's in North Carolina. I think Morganton is where a lot of the industrial commons is related, but it's a network of different manufacturing. So I'm not exactly sure like where material return is, but they're pulling things from all around, and Morganton is kind of like a hub for a lot of that.
I'm just reading these because I want to share the recording later. St. Ignatius, Loyola, and NYC is using ethics merch for our new St. Ignatius swag. That's awesome, Jean. Yeah, glad to hear that. That's what I think that this again goes back to like our stated values. And Julie, I appreciated you saying like, you know, Julie and I both worked in campus ministry at John Carroll, Julie for much longer than I did. But every time we had a Man Racer retreat, right? Like the new t-shirt was like the thing, like everybody was obsessed with the t-shirt. And it's like, you know, if we don't have the money to ethically purchase these, like, do we need to buy them? You know, if we're going on a retreat that's about the spiritual exercises and kind of living love. So I think that was a really good point, Julie.
Yeah, so we also have talked a lot about that when we're working with campus ministers in particular, because we're talking about, we need a whole culture shift, right? Like we need to change what that looks like. And we can start, I think, by talking about introducing ethical, like an ethical t-shirt or an ethical sweatshirt, whatever it is, and then saying we're only going to do we're going to do this every other year. or something like that to start, which is really hard for a student because you're collecting all those things. And like, what about 2022? Like, what do you mean? I'm not gonna have a shirt that says that. But I think it starts the conversation of it's going to be a little bit more expensive. So we need to be able to conserve our resources in other places. Like, how do we make tough decisions about that? So yeah, first we've kind of talked about it as like a wave, like first comes the ethical purchasing and then comes like and then we purchase less. So that's the hope anyway.
Oh, I see another question in the chat, which is, once recycling is done and a new product is formed, how are they then resold? How is the product reintroduced into society? Is it advertised as to how the item is produced?
That's the idea. So right now it's, if we're talking about, yeah, once the recycling is done. So if we're talking about the socks, right now we're the main kind of consumer for that is going to be these bookstores. So being able to maybe put a school logo on them, like figuring out the weaving machine to be able to put school logos on them. So the kind of outside marketing is a little bit, it's kind of like it's being created as we go. Like the sock weaving machine like was created and debuted like a couple months ago. So like they're kind of figuring this out as they go. So they are for sale on the ISN web store right now. I think just like a generic version of it, but yeah, so that's what I know about it. I've learned so much about like textile manufacturing that I did not know. So that's been fascinating.
There were two more questions, Julie. So Maurice knows a company that manufactures materials for prosthetics, bandages, and is wondering if she can be put in touch with our organization, or probably with the collection and the manufacturing collective.
I'm going to put my email down in this chat so that anyone can
tell them I'm
And then I saw, sorry, Anne-Marie, I saw that by the end of high school, each of your kids had over 60 t-shirts, which sounds probably right. Is there a standard Ignatian t-shirt that can include the various Ignatian institutions and ministries? That's a great question, or a great idea to consider, or for us to talk about what that might look like.
Yeah, definitely. You'd have to get all those schools on board though. That's the tricky part. But I agree. I think that's really, yeah, that would make a lot of sense.
And then Michael Downs asked, are there any more mainstream brands you can really get behind if the smaller ones are few and far between? So he mentions Patagonia's activism and encouraging worn wear.
Yeah, they are a really amazing company and do a lot of work on buying back what they sell, repairing what they buy back, and or selling used items. So they really do a really amazing job with all of that. So that would probably be the one as far as like mainstream brands, the one I would lift up is probably one of the best. And also like design. I think this is another thing to think about, like design to last, right? Things aren't just made for that 7 or fewer wears before it falls apart. So yeah, you really picked I feel like the top tier there with Patagonia, like expensive, but probably designed to last a lifetime. So,
and I think that, right, like going back to that hierarchy of needs, I know that this is harder at schools, but I am really interested to think about, like, you know, that idea of like borrowing and thrifting and sharing and swapping. Like, what could that look like at our schools? I understand that won't address the desire for like new t-shirts, but you know, my friends and I before COVID would do a clothing swap every so often, and it was like, okay, I get a new to me thing, you know, that hasn't had to be created from scratch. So I'm interested to think about that just as like a systems wide way of being really creative and thinking about, you know, how do we, you know, live in circular ways on a finite planet. And then there was another question: do we have a list of companies that follow the ecological ethical principles we can support? That's a good question.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I can send Brenna some resources there are things called like brand trackers, and you kind of plug things in and they'll give you like a grade, like they do this well on paying their employees. They do this well on, thinking about caring for the earth. So I can send a couple of those out there that are just interesting to do some research of, maybe pulling old things that you have and kind of like, what does this brand do? So, yeah, so I can, oh, look, somebody already put one in there, Green America. Oh, that was Brenna. Good job.
Yeah, and I'll add that. I'll send the follow-up email and I'll add those resources to the agenda. Always at the bottom, I have resources that folks have shared during the conversation. Yeah, so. All right, well, Julie, it sounds like the kiddos are waking up, and I do want to give folks time to have conversations in small groups, just because I find that that's like a really valuable part of our time together. But Julie, before you go, thank you so much for your presentation and for the great work. And I'll also put Julie's email in the follow-up documents in case anyone wants to reach out.
Great, thanks everybody, I appreciate it.
Awesome. All right, welcome back, everyone. I hope that your conversations were thought-provoking. I'm sure that they were. This is a great group. I have just a couple of announcements, and then if anyone wants to share anything from your conversations, that's wonderful. First thing, I felt bad I missed this part of Michael's comments, and I think it's an interesting idea. He said that they've had students use a t-shirt press at conferences, so they bring in their own used t-shirt and print a student design logo rather than buying something new, which I think is a really cool idea. Just very quickly, a couple of announcements. Our Lenten series for the Ignatian Solidarity Network is happening. I mean, Lent is coming, not until March, but it's coming soon. So I'll put this in the follow-up resources, but if you're interested in receiving kind of a justice reflection every day throughout Lent, it's a really wonderful series. The other information that we have is that we are going to be doing something that we are calling Laudato Si Lent. And so basically each year we try to have some sort of environmental campaign during Lent at ISN. And so this one is going to be exploring each of the goals of the Laudato Si action platform. So there's basically 7 weeks in Lent. If you count Easter Monday to Earth Day, which is the Friday after Easter. So each week we'll be exploring a different one of the goals, and I'm really excited about it, hoping to make it really practical, and you all are getting a sneak peek at the logo. It's just hot off the presses from our design director, Kim Miller. So I'm excited about that. We'll send out information if you're interested in signing up. And then the last announcement is our next conversation. I will also put this in a follow-up email. We'll be speaking with the Center for Environmental Transformation in Camden, New Jersey. And so they do a lot of work on environmental justice issues. And I'm just really excited for them to share some ideas about the work that they're doing and how that could be applied in our communities. The theme is integral ecology and the contemplation to attain love. So really this idea of how do we connect all of these issues, social and economic and racial justice and environmental, and really live into them in a loving way. So those are my 3 announcements. If anyone has any thoughts or anything that they'd like to share or follow-up questions, feel free to unmute, and then yeah, we'll hang out for just a couple more minutes if anyone has anything to share. Julia, yeah.
Sure, just a quick thing that Ted and I were talking about, the integration, in his case, into his school as a high school teacher. And then I was talking about, the community or the parish. And one of the things that we just started talking about was, I kept thinking as Julie was presenting, was we mammals, we 2-legged mammals, but all mammals are quite tribal. And, what is this, and how do we combat this desire or compulsion that we have, that we need to have that t-shirt to show we've been at that conference, or to have that bumper sticker on the back of our car, which is also important for other people to know that things are happening out there and maybe welcome them to our tribe. But at the same time, there's consumerism. I mean, even the Catholic Climate Covenant's Laudato Si action plan piece there, we're all part of God's planet. One of the first things they showed in their very first presentation, before there were even materials out there, was you can buy tchotchke, you can get the t-shirts, and you can get, I don't know, anybody's ideas on that. I'm trying to wrap my brain around why we have it and how we rein it in, and is that really practical? Because then there are people out there that are getting employment and jobs, and putting food on their table. So it's this interwoven kind of thing we've got.
Yeah, I think that's the gray area that Julie was talking about. Does anyone have a response? Or Sister Mary, were you going to respond to Julia?
Yeah, I have a comment. I won't say it's a response, because I'll respond to my own struggles. I'll go back to the two standards. And, when we talk about advertisers and we talk about over the years, needs versus wants, Satan is no dummy. And sin is, we don't sin because we think it's bad. We sin because it looks good. And so the competition, that if I'm not grounded in something, whether it's God or my own sense of the common good and common humanity for people who don't have a belief in a God, if I don't discern and tap into my spirituality, I will want the Apple Watch. I will want the new KitchenAid. I will want the t-shirt that says 2022. And so for me personally, it's always coming back and discerning in the light of what Ignatius says, there's two goods. There's nothing wrong with a t-shirt, nothing wrong with a watch. And I have to ask, in the light of my own spirituality and faith, do I need it? And the impact upon, or as the speaker spoke, you go to your cupboard. Mea culpa, I'm a nun, and I can go to my cupboard, and there's 2 or 3 blouses that the sister that went to heaven said to me a few years ago, you wear the same ones. That's true. And yet there's X number in the cupboard. And so for me, the answer is always coming back. If I'm not grounded and discerning, the banner of Satan will win out. But it's a really tapping into the spirituality of the person that helps. Amen.
Thanks, Sister Mary. Always have wise words for us.
Oh, they're for me more. I'm speaking to myself, Brenna. Thank you.
And Steve, I saw that you had your hand raised.
Yes. Wow, it's not going to be nearly as eloquent as Sister Mary there.
Oh, Steve, I'm giving you a quarter. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's just we're locked into ways of doing things and such, and a lot of the folks who are organizing, they want the the youth on the retreat to get excited about something or other, and we're just locked into this mindset that you've got to have the stuff, you got to have the tchotchke, you've got, and it's, look, there's a teachable moment there in terms of Catholic social teaching and care for God's creation and things like that. I don't know. Good gracious, how many t-shirts I've got sitting in my house, and and like so many of us, that we have too many things. And so I think it's just, we have to really change, particularly in the United States, I think this Western mindset that I have to have something all of the time. I had to talk to somebody in our children's liturgy of the word, and God bless this person, but he kept buying these plastic trinkets that he'd be giving out to the kids. You know where they're going. I've got kids. I've got a basement full of, pieces of plastic that are going to now sit in a landfill for the next 1,000 years or 10,000 years. And so, yeah, we just need to move beyond that kind of mindset and try to look at a different way. That's all.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that something that I'm hearing you and Sister Mary talk about is St. Ignatius also talks about like following the thought or the desire to its origin, right? So like you're not evil if you want a shirt, right? But it is like following it all the way back to the origin. Is it like, why do I want that shirt? Is it because of like pride? Is it because I'm trying to like keep up with whatever is going on. And it is great because, like Julie said, you know, we're advertised to, and we're only human, right? And we've been raised in this, like, we're swimming in the water. So in some ways, you know, we can't, you know, kind of beat ourselves up about it. And that's why I think, like, week one of the spiritual exercises is so central as we kind of excavate the spiritual heart of the ecological crisis, right? Is this idea of, like, being a loved sinner, right? So it's like, it helps you to kind of be free of that paralysis, or that really, like, you know, beating your chest about it. It's like, there is space for that, but then there's also space to understand that, like, usually we do desire the good, and, like, how do we creatively work together and collaborate to change the system? So those options are easy to access, because obviously they are not right now. So anyone else? It's 4:05, so thank you for sticking around. I'll kind of officially conclude our gathering. So if anyone needs to drop off, but I'm happy to hang on and continue chatting with anyone else who's interested. So thanks for being here, everyone.
Thank you.